Hello, everyone. Welcome. We got about one more minute. We're going to wait for people to get on into our holiday Zoom room. So glad to see you all. Welcome to Hearst Castle. Oh, I'm seeing lots of waving. We're going to move back. We're going to let one of our landscapers drive through the picture. Welcome to Hearst Castle for a Portscast Christmas special. Holidays, no matter what you're celebrating, they're full of tradition. And we're going to explore the traditions of Hearst Castle. Back in the 1930s, that was 90 years ago. Things are quite different, but there's back then, but you'll see lots of similarities to today. So we're going to travel back in time on this Thursday. Happy Thursday, everyone. How many teachers and students out there are so excited for winter break? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. You've been working so hard this year. Yes, we have some people raising their hand. You've been working so hard this year, and the break is on the horizon. Well, we've got 20 people raising their hand so far. I know you're all excited. So let's get started. Hearst Castle, the house itself, it was constructed starting back in the 1920s by a man named William Randolph Hearst. He was a famous American and Californian, famous for his newspaper publishing, amongst other things like art collecting and just being a very influential figure across the country. So he built this house. He lived to be 88 years old, passing in 1951, and then he gave the house and the art collection to the state of California. Well, he celebrated Christmas, and we decorate the house in the historical fashion. So how he had decorated back in the 1930s, and we're going to explore those traditions. So let's get started. So if you have a piece of paper out and you just want to jot down some notes, you don't have to, it's not mandatory, but I'll ask a few questions throughout our program today, and you could jot down your answers if you have them. My first one is, how do you spend the holidays or any celebration? How do you spend it? Do you get together with people? Do you decorate? Do you eat certain foods? Don't you love food? You probably are all back on lunch. Well, I come from a background where my ancestors came from Eastern Europe and Poland. So we have a special food that we eat. It's called a pierogi. It's kind of like a pasta dumpling with a filling like potato or cheese or sauerkraut on the inside. And that's something special that my family does. So if you want to write down a favorite holiday of yours and one of the ways you might celebrate it, go ahead. That could be your first write up. We're going to be heading up these stairs. We're going in the house. Oh, look at that. That house towers like the trees inside. We're going to go in and see the trees. I wanted to share with you an image because you might be wondering, well, how do we know how William Randolph Hearst spent his holidays at his castle? Now, this wasn't his only home. So he is not here every single Christmas, but he spent many Christmases here. And for at least one of them in the early 1930s. Now, when I share an image, my friends, the image, sometimes it gets black and then the picture comes up, okay? So thank you so much for your patience. But that's an incredible Christmas tree outside. Compare that to the man standing in the frame next to it. And what a contrast, a Christmas tree, which we kind of think of wintry places with Christmas trees right next to that palm tree. This picture was taken in the early 1930s. The man standing there was a famous guest of William Randolph Hearst. He liked to throw big parties. So with friends and family, this man is a famous Polish, actually. He was a prime minister and for a short time in Poland and a composer. He played the piano. So wow, that's a big tree. The trees inside the house are just like that. Now we can no longer put up a tree like that out on the main terrace. of the house, because in the winter it gets pretty stormy. And that tree would just blow over. So we're going to start by looking at the front doors. We'll stop for a moment here. Decorated with wreaths. Do you have any wreaths on your front door? A wreath is a great way to celebrate and put up a decoration. Today, we oftentimes use pine trees and pine boughs and fir to decorate, but they use the holly, a type of tree, the holly. So we have holly wreaths up here, and I'll just stand in front of them to give you some size, because everything at Hearst Castle is big. Are you ready to go inside? Let's head in. I want to share a picture of William Randolph Hearst while we walk in, standing in front of his castle door. He actually didn't really call it a castle. He called his house Casa Grande, the big house. It has 115 rooms. These are some of his friends. He's standing in the center, and as you can see, the 3 wreaths are right behind him. Now that's important because we study these historic images so we understand how the house was decorated 90 years ago. Have you ever looked at old pictures and historic images in your textbooks to learn about history? Yeah, I bet you're doing the same thing. And that's what we do at Hearst Castle to understand the history of the house. Okay, everyone, we're inside. I'm really excited to show you this tree. It's huge. Here we are in the living room. Okay, this is your time for your oohs and ahs. Here's your next question that you can write down. What kind of decorations do you use during your holiday celebrations? Do you have any favorite decorations? Go ahead and just think about that and just take a mental note, or you can write it down. This tree right here is 18 feet tall. It's 18 feet tall plus a 3-foot star topping the tree. The ceiling of this room is 24 feet tall. As you can see, the room is pretty big and the ceiling's pretty high. And there's a second tree. We're going to explore that tree in just a little bit. But let's explore the one right in front of us. This is one of my favorite ornaments on the tree. And Randy Harris was a little kid whose parents worked at the castle back in the 1930s. And before he passed away, he wrote something called an oral history. And because we have that oral history, again, we know more information about the history of Hearst Castle. Randy Harris came to an employee Christmas party. Mr. Hearst liked to throw Christmas parties for his employees and hand out gifts. Randy remembered the bird and peacock ornaments that were clipped on the tree. That was something that stood out for him. Do you have a favorite ornament? You can write that down or take note. I'm going to zoom in on the peacock one. It's hard to see with all the colors and lights. There's hundreds of lights on this tree. There's glass ornaments. There's these feathered peacock ornaments, icicles, beads, little baskets. So that is what Randy Harris recalls were the peacock ornaments. But then some children recalled 2 trees, 2 towering pines, And one tree had toys that were themed for little girls. And the other tree had toys that were themed for little boys. We're going to see the second tree in a little bit. Oh, look at here. Here is a doll. Do you want to know how much a doll cost back in 1930s? A doll just like the one we see right here costed just over $1 90 years ago. Oh, and there's some poinsettias on the table. Poinsettias is a plant that we oftentimes associate with Christmas time and the holidays. We're going to learn a little bit more about the poinsettia in just a moment. Let's take a step back from this tree and just check it out. So how does this compare to the tree that was in this room from 90 years ago? Now, this is a fake tree. And it came in sections. And they brought a crane-like machine inside of the room and they put the tree up. But I'm going to show you a picture of the tree from the 1930s. Thank you so much for your patience. It was a little different. There's a few things. We try to be as historically accurate as possible. But this tree did not actually have any lights on it. It had a spotlight. So it had a light sitting probably on the ground, shining at the tree and making all the garland and the tinsel glow. What is tinsel? Now, when I was a kid, we used to use tinsel on the tree, and they're long strands of silver. But it's not so great for the environment anymore. And boy, it makes a mess. And you can really only use tinsel once, and then you have to take it off the tree, and then it gets all bunched up and it's not long and hangs anymore. So it usually goes in the garbage. At least that's what we did when we were kids. So we no longer, at least at my house, use tinsel anymore. But the trees back then looked kind of messy and just kind of shaggy even. Now this tree in the picture is real, but Mr. Hearst did not like to cut down trees. Gosh, no. He actually had his construction workers go out to his ranch land and cut branches and boughs off of other trees. And that's what they used. And they would truck up one year, they had 20 trucks bring branches and boughs to the house, and they constructed the tree. They would use a metal center, and they would use wire to connect the tree boughs and branches to the metal center. So this is basically parts of a real tree, but not a real tree. And it was just a little bit taller, and they actually hung the star from the ceiling. So our star is hung from the top of the tree and not from the ceiling. Structurally, we couldn't hang it from that ceiling, which, my friends, is a 500-year-old ceiling. So let's head over this way. We're going to check out the fireplace mantle. Oh, we got a big group out there. Hi, everyone. On the fireplace mantle are set poinsettias. Raise your hand if you've ever seen a poinsettia before. We associate them with really cold regions. At least I always did as a kid, because I grew up in a cold place called Chicago. So the poinsettia to me was a plant that came around when the snow fell and when the holidays came. Well, poinsettias are actually from Mexico. and they were brought to the United States in the early 1800s. They became very popular around the 1900s when most of the poinsettias were grown right here in California, in Southern California. They actually need a lot of light to turn red, for those leaves to turn red. All right, before we head over to see that other tree, we are going through these doors.
Mr. Hearst was very generous with the children and with all the
Wow, there are 8 trees. There are 3 trees on each wall. This is the dining hall called the refectory, and all the meals were served here. And they actually grew a lot of their own food, vegetable gardens. They grew a lot of their own animals, like poultry and cows and beef, and they had fruit trees and nut trees. So they were actually producing a lot of their own food on the ranch that this castle is situated on. And there's 22 seats at this table. Could we fit your whole classroom at the table? What do you think? So there are 3 trees on this side, 3 trees on that side. And if you look all the way up there, your eyes are not deceiving you. That's called the musician's balcony. And there are 2 trees at the top. Now, how did they decorate 90 years ago? The reason why we know where to place the trees in the house, where did Mr. Hearst place his trees? It's because we have these old photos that help us understand history. These trees do have lights on them in the historic photo. And there are, gosh, I'm counting. Can you count how many trees you see? How many trees do you see in this photo? Well, on one side, we have 3 trees. Towards the back, you counted 4. And then on the opposite side, I see at least 1 tree, but I wonder if there were actually some extra trees. Let's look at the table settings. Are there any special dishes that you use during the holidays? Special plates or cups to eat with all those yummy foods? So you're probably thinking by now that this house is pretty fancy, but look at the ketchup and the mustard on the table. Mr. Hearst wanted a reminder. He wanted a reminder that his fancy house, Casa Grande, the big house, or what we call Hearst Castle, was built on his family's ranch here on the central coast of California. So the ketchup and the mustard reminded him of things that he loved to do, like camping and horseback riding. So there were always bottles of pickles and condiments and jams and jellies and ketchup and mustard. Am I making you hungry yet? Let's check out a menu. They were pretty fancy around here, and they would print menus up of what you were going to eat and what movie you were going to watch later. Mr. Hearst, he was also in the movie business in addition to newspapers. So he built a movie theater at his large home. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that there is the name of the movie that he and all his party, his guests and family and friends were going to be watching that evening. So Wednesday, December 25th, 1946. I know we said we were going to venture back to the 1930s. That's where a lot of these photos that we have been seeing are coming from. This menu happens to be from the 1940s. But look at that. So we see lunch at the top. Avocado salad, Finn and Hattie. Ooh, that's kind of like a smoked salmon, but it's a smoked fish. parsley, potatoes, noodles. What would you put on your plate? Would you put any of that on your plate? Any of this sounding good? There's fruit and ice and cookies. Now for dinner. Well, this seems like a traditional Christmas dinner: roast turkey, dressing, cranberry sauce, mashed potatoes, string beans. Plum pudding is kind of like a cake that is baked in a certain shaped mold. And then they put a sauce over it. There's ice cream and cake. They were actually making their own ice cream up here. They're dairy cows that were on the ranch surrounding the castle. The dairy cows would produce a lot of milk. They would turn it into butter. And one of the men who recorded an oral history for our archives and library said they'd bring about 30 pounds of butter to the castle kitchen every 2 days. So did you find any favorites on the menu? Why don't you go ahead and think about what kind of traditional foods that you eat during the holidays, and maybe write down a food, or maybe take a mental note of a traditional food that you show or eat during the holidays. All this talk about food is making me hungry. So we're going to head through this door. We're going to go back into the living room, which is called the assembly room. There are 2 doors on either side of the fireplace. I'm going to open up this door for us. I want you all to see it. Boy, I think I have about the best job in the world, because I get to learn all about the history of Hearst Castle, looking at these historic photographs and reading oral histories from people who used to work here 90 years ago. So I'm glad I get to share it with you. Let's head through that room. I'm going to turn us around so you feel like you're walking with me. We're going to go look at the tree on the other side of the room, past some of those poinsettias. Wow, what a great piece of information. Poinsettias actually come from Mexico and are grown in sunny climates. Wow, an identical tree on this side. They didn't always have 2 trees, but when they did, they went all out, and we like that idea. So we put the 2 trees. So the kids from the employee Christmas party did talk about the gifts that were under the tree. Mr. Hearst was very generous. Now, if you were an adult, like for our teachers out there, you might get a really beautiful sweater. Even better, you might get a piece of jewelry with diamonds or emeralds or pearls. You might get a set of silver. Not a bad gift, right? If you were friends with William Randolph Hearst. But if you were a kid, if your parents worked at the castle as a housekeeper or a butler or a kitchen staff or a landscaper, you would get to come and pick out a toy. Yes, you could pick out a bicycle. And a woman named, actually, I mean, she was a kid back in the 30s. Her name was June Zegar. Her father worked for the car service that would drive Mr. Hearst to and from the train station in San Luis Obispo. She recalls coming here with her sister. And she was, this was in the 1930s, and she was 8 or 9. And there was an employee party 2 days before Christmas. She walked in the room, and there were 2 trees in the living room. These are her words: as high as the ceiling. And the trees had been brought up branch by branch. Oh, by 10 trucks. I think I said 20 trucks earlier. And they had been screwed together because they were so tremendous. One tree was a boy's tree and one was a girl's tree, and none of the gifts were wrapped. So that's why We see some unwrapped gifts down here. This is called a pedal car. And a pedal car back in the 1930s was pretty expensive. The 1930s was pretty hard on Americans. The Great Depression was going on. Things were a little bit different at the castle, but a pedal car would cost you $14.95. Yes, you would just sit in that car and use your feet to pedal around. And a bicycle, can we see this bicycle right here? That bicycle would have cost you about $19. $19. At the other tree, we had a red wagon. Do you ever pull a red wagon around? They're really handy for kids and adults. A red wagon would cost you $3.49. I've looked it up on Amazon, and a red wagon today is about $120. Zoom out a little bit. And what kind of entertainment? Oftentimes we turn on Christmas movies today, but what kind of entertainment would you have around Christmas? Well, here's an old radio and two songs that came out in the 1930s, Santa Claus is Coming to Town or Winter Wonderland. But Silent Night and Frosty the Snowman and Jingle Bells were all really popular songs. Can you write down your favorite holiday song? Something that you like to sing while you're celebrating? Someone may have been playing piano too. Here we have a piano with some poinsettias on it. And we'll take our, oh, this is kind of fun. Here's a little basket. And some of the kids talked about these little baskets being filled with little treats and candies. So we have baskets on the trees. So we know a lot about Christmas at the castle because of the memories that people had when they either worked here, lived here, took pictures here 90 years ago, or came up for employee parties. They were kids, their parents worked here. And we've compiled all of that information from oral histories and letters and pictures. And that helped us understand how Christmas was celebrated, how the traditions were celebrated back in the 1930s, 90 years ago by William Randolph Hearst. Oh, let's get that other tree in the picture. Oh, there we go. There we go. And my one last question for you is, how do you celebrate the holidays? And do you have a favorite memory from the past? It's kind of fun if you write this memory down today and you save this piece of paper and you tuck this piece of paper away. 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you might look back at this memory and just travel back in time, just like we got to travel back in time. 90 years to the 1930s here at Hearst Castle. So thank you all for joining me today on this Portscast Christmas special. I hope you all had a good time, and I hope you enjoy your winter break and your holiday season, and I hope to see you one day right here at the castle. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Bye.